Um, I will start by having each of the panelists introduce themselves. Chido Tasha was supposed to join. I spoke to her. She hasn't joined yet, but I'm sure she will along the way. If we could start with Magdalene, if you could introduce yourself, and then Akinyi will introduce herself, and then we will get started.
Good evening, everyone. From across Africa. My name is Magdalene Kariuki. I am from Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya, that is I'm situated. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, as well as a policy and government relations expert. I'm currently working in PR and communications for Oxygen. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Magdalene. Akinyi, if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Akinyi, Aurelia Akinyi, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and currently pursuing my PhD at Shoeless Law School, that is in Dalhousie University, Canada.
Okay, thanks for that introduction. If we could start with the introduction, like to begin with, what is a digital free trade area? Magda, if you could start with that and speak a bit about the digital free trade area, what is it about, and that kind of thing.
A digital or online that is supposed to enhance and facilitate trade across the various members of COMESA. So where this differs, I guess, from what people would know, just to differentiate from the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, is that the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is more continental and covers all the countries of Africa, whereas the Digital Free Trade Area only covers COMESA, because this is actually a program that is being run by COMESA. COMESA being the common market for Eastern and Southern Africa. So that's just to give it a brief background and just to give it, just a quick introduction and giving it as much of a simplistic definition as possible. So, okay, great, fantastic if you can hear me. So, just to continue, is that the digital FTA was rolled out in 2018, and in terms of the design and what it was supposed to encompass, it was supposed to include various things such as the electronic certificate of origin, as well as electronic logistics, as well as electronic legislation. So basically, e-legislation. So basically, what that means is that these were the three pillars that were informing the structuring of the digital FTA by COMESA that was being rolled out in 2018. So in terms of where it was to be modeled, we were looking at starting it in 15 countries out of the 19 member states. And the purpose of it largely was to enable large and small enterprises, the MSME agenda, to enhance their trade and expanding it cross-border.
If I may ask a bit more about the digital free trade area, is it something that's common, or is it something that, where was COMESA coming from? To just give a brief, your understanding of where was COMESA coming from by the time they were getting into this digital free trade area kind of arrangement.
So I guess in my highlights, I can look at what has been informing a lot of trade policies that a country such as Kenya has been, that has largely been informed directly on improving the ease of doing business. So the ease of doing business is a world index that is facilitated by the World Bank through its IFC. And basically what we look at is we not only look at some of the issues impacting on local trade. The indices are not unique to Kenya. These are indices that are used across the board. They inform policies, be it at country level, at regional, continental level, international level, informing trade policies, various economic policies that are to be either perhaps policies or legislations that have to be placed to facilitate trade. So where COMESA, to answer your question, where COMESA was coming from, was to look at ways in which they could enhance trade across the different member states. As I mentioned, kept coming up this during the meetings when COMESA would have them, was with regards to issues related to challenges that are impeding trade in one way or the other. And so, in terms of trying to come up with a solution, they model what now we are calling the trade area against the Malaysian Free Trade Zone. So the Malaysian Free Trade Zone was where the party transactions were to be connected in real time through a web of ledgers that are secure. So similar to what we have in blockchain. So it is not surprising then that even in the digital free trade area that has been proposed for COMESA, it actually then it really is around issues related to blockchain technology. So blockchain technology is actually an anchor of this very discussion. So just to answer in terms of where COMESA was perhaps coming from, so the thinking was what could they do in order to enhance cross-border trade while addressing some of the issues such as logistical challenges that were either impeding or slowing down trade in the member states. So an example of where that had been introduced and rather what perhaps was considered in terms of modeling the digital free trade area for COMESA is now the Malaysian free trade zone, being an example which are working with and basically what is done is more or less embedded blockchain technologies in order to inform trade between the various traders. Yeah.
Okay, that's very interesting, especially on the blockchain and how that's supposed to work. So, Akinyi, if we could also get like let's hear Akinyi, like your understanding of the digital free trade area and where COMESA and what COMESA is trying to do, and your thoughts on that.
Thank you. So generally, if just like Magdalene has said that the digital free trade area generally is just a form of a platform that eases or facilitates trade by digital means, so that you have trade that was previously analog move or shift or transition to a more digital platform that makes work easier for traders, that is buyers and consumers. And the benefit of that is that the consumer gets to get more important, or the consumer gets to get value for the time and the money that he or she spends on the products, because the products get to him easily, and then the transportation costs that normally add to maybe 90% of the production are highly reduced. And coming back to COMESA generally, the COMESA Digital Free Trade Area the project started in 2018. And it has three pillars, much as it's not fully implemented, but it has three pillars, that is the e-logistics, the e-trade, and the e-regulation. The e-regulation essentially tries to create a working environment that ensures that a working legal environment that ensures that e-trade or digital free trade area runs smoothly. The e-logistics ensures that trade is facilitated by ways of ensuring that things like the electronic certificate of origin can easily be accessed. Things like trade finance is highly digitized. And on e-trade, it essentially ensures that the transport, things like costs of production are easily minimized to the sense that a buyer and consumer can easily negotiate. And I want you to imagine a scenario where you have a banker and a buyer and a seller having a smart contract, and then in association with their banks. So they're able to have a smart to agree on their specific terms and conditions that have that they need to have in that contract in real time. And then on the other hand, things like there's a to other to PSA notifies the seller and the buyer that the goods have arrived to the buyer in the condition that they have arrived in, and also immediately there's also transfer of funds, and also there's also change in ownership. So it's things happen in real time, and also that also ensures that there's a minimize on things like border at the border post, so that things time spent on things like a certificate of origin to prove authenticity. Those are things that can actually be accessed online before the goods actually reach to that particular country, so that the time is essentially minimized. And that is one of the benefits of a digital free trade area. So the COMESA was approved in 2018, and I think it's something that given that the African population is estimated to be over double its current almost double by 2050, and it's by 2100 years. 2100, yes. So it's actually something that it's going to be of significance, given that we have to move with technology, the fast increasing technology. So it's actually going to be an important aspect of trade, because it's going to also minimize just as I had said, it's going to minimize the transportation costs, the things that come with challenges that come along with taxation and all that. So I think it's a good thing that COMESA has initiated, but we also need to understand that digital free trade area is not something that is foreign. You asked that question, whether it's something that is novel. Yeah, it's not something that is foreign, because as it has been seen in other regional economic integrations, like for example, the EAC has one. Not really, it's unclear whether it's really functioning, but I know the EAC has one. I know also SADC has approved digital free trade area, the strategy in 2012. So it's not really something that is in Africa.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks so much for that, Akinyi. There was a last statement that you missed, but you got most of it. And it's quite interesting what you say, that even the EAC, the East African community, also has some form of digital free trade. And I would assume that has to do with the one point of clearance of the port at the port, so that when someone is importing within East Africa, if, for instance, you're bringing cargo through Mombasa, you only check in and have it cleared in Mombasa. You don't need to go clearing in every East African country that you go into, so that now there's only one point of entry where you record the entry, and then when the goods get into the next country, it's a bit seamless when they get in there. There's no stopping to clear for customs, because you have cleared them at the port of entry of one of the EAC countries, which I think is pretty, it's pretty efficient for trade within the region when that happens. But I found it interesting, Magdalene, like from what you had started speaking about, like on the blockchain, use of blockchain technology within the digital free trade area. If also you could, mention a little bit more about that, and also give like the Malaysia digital free trade area and other working examples of countries and regions that have digital free trade areas, and those that are efficient, you could actually maybe mention what are some of the things they're doing, so that they are efficient, because then we will go a bit more to discuss on how well COMESA is doing on its part.
Thank you, Christine. Though I lost you a bit in the question, but I hope I captured most of it. So you asked me about blockchain integration. So the discussion around blockchain integration just as a whole within the COMESA, even among the COMESA member states, is something that of course has picked up. Just okay, maybe not just for COMESA members, but generally then on the continent, not just globally, looking at what it can do. So I'll give an example where we have someone, for instance, we have maybe, for instance, a Zambian exporter. And yes, we have a Zambian exporter and they're exporting to Egypt, Egypt being a member of COMESA as well. One of the concerns has always been the need to have an intermediary. So the intermediary in this case being a financial institution, because there's always that concern of trust, really, between the exporter and the importer, because yes, you may have interacted, but perhaps at a business level, there's always an issue of mistrust, and that's where you find that a lot of times you find, for instance, the person purchasing the goods will first deposit the money at the bank, and then we have the exporter accessing the funds upon confirmation of goods, and that is also with regards to quality, quantity, and all those and the specifications that had been ordered for. So in that regard, just looking at where perhaps blockchain then is coming in, perhaps the current status quo in this whole conversation is, for instance, in such a discussion, because among the things that is feared is that with the integration of something such as blockchain would be the diminished role of banks, or financial institutions. So you're finding that, for instance, among COMESA members, we're looking at $450 million that is paid to commercial banks annually in terms of confirmation of credit, to confirm letters of credit. But then this is something that perhaps will be taken out of the system because through the integration of blockchain, these are able to access that information. That is the trade being between the exporter and the importer simultaneously, and that is through the application of blockchain. Yeah. So whereas obviously this is not something that would happen in the immediate, and obviously it's a conversation also that I'm sure banks are closely, or financial institutions are closely following, but it's something that we have at the back of our minds. But even just as we also still have the conversation just linked to blockchain, will please allow me, is to look at, for instance, how many countries, for instance, within COMESA have already developed enabling legislations, as Ms. Akinyi referred to, or enabling regulation. If you look at our countries, whereas I know, there's a blockchain policy that was supposed to have come out and operationalized, at least by now, seeing as we are talking as, as being active members in the in COMESA and looking at us benefiting, where do we stand as a country on the issue? And also just not having a policy in place, but also where do we stand with the regulators? The regulators in this case, not just looking at those involved in the import-export, but looking at, for instance, the revenue authorities and the central banks. So looking at it just in terms of, we have the idea, yes, which I think is fantastic, and also the integration which offers the opportunity to disrupt and really, but it's good. It's not, when I say the word disrupt, it's not to mean destruction or destroying. It's just saying, it's destruction in the sense that it will offer a sense of efficiency. But as we do so, the thinking would be, okay, fine, we have this that now we are looking to use, because if you look at the COMESA digital free trade area, as I mentioned, it is modeled against the Malaysian free trade zone, which, as I mentioned, is highly anchored on the adoption of blockchain technologies. So that is something that we're looking to adopt as COMESA. Really, it's to look at the operating environment and the context within which we would have this. So we might have countries that are willing and they're able to embrace this wholly, but it needs to be juxtaposed against also the positions and or the current economic capacities of our other members.
Actually, that's sorry to interject, but I think I
It's
actually agree with what you're saying, and I think that's a point for discussion which we could have even a whole next
sorry.
discussion about, because I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think there is much more that needs to be said on that, and we will definitely like discuss a bit more about that. But yeah, just go on.
Yes, yes. So I was just going to give an example, just quickly, if you could please allow. I know time is moving, that I'm also trying to speak as fast as I can, but I'm hoping that the points are getting across.
Yeah.
So I was just going to give the example of, let's say we compare countries such as Rwanda and Kenya, and then we compare that to economies such as the Republic of Djibouti, and also compare that, for instance, with countries such as Ethiopia. So, for instance, if you look at those two countries, especially a country such as Ethiopia, it has been having a closed economy. Yeah. So, in terms of even conversations just around even foreign exchange, this is the time that we are starting to get excited and saying that the Ethiopian economy is finally beginning to open up, because now we are looking at a bit of relaxation in terms of the rules in terms of forex exchange and forex trade. And now here we are knocking on their doors and telling them, okay, hold on. Even as we start having the conversations of forex exchange, we have something here called blockchain.
Yeah.
So we need, just look at it in terms of at scale. Yeah. So it's a good thing. It's a fantastic model. Just also thinking about, for instance, what it did for the Malaysian economy. As I said, what it was modeled out of. And it was looking at increasing or providing 60,000 new jobs that were previously not there. It was looking to support $65 billion worth of goods moving within the digital free trade zone. And that was a projection given for 2025. Obviously, I believe these projections have shifted as a result of COVID. But if you look at in terms of even SME goods export increase, that was facilitated by this free trade zone, we're looking at $38 million worth in a year. So if this is what we are looking at just for a country such as Malaysia, what would this do for multiple countries within COMESA? And I don't know if you want me to put a comma there, or you would allow me to just quickly look, for instance, the total trade volumes that are currently existing.
So let's just put a comma right there. Chido Chashe joined. So if Chido Chashe, you could quickly quickly introduce yourself and give your opening remarks on the COMESA digital free trade area. Mention on its historical background and a bit of the motivation. Yeah, and tie into what Magdalene has just said.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry for joining in late. So I'm Chidochashe Ngwe. I am a master's student at University of the Western Cape in South Africa, and I'm from Zimbabwe. So maybe to just get into the gist of the discussion, I don't know now, maybe it has been mentioned that this idea to establish the DFTA started in 2017, when the Secretariat announced that it was going to launch a DFTA that was more or less going to be a vehicle for trade facilitation. So the DFTA, its strategic plan, is basically based on three pillars, which is e-regulation, e-logistics, and e-trade. So e-regulation generally looks at also roping in governments to ensure that they come up with regulatory laws and policies that facilitate digital trade. Logistics basically being digitalizing the whole trade facilitation process to ensure that there is free movement of goods. That also there is the digitalization of the trade financing sector. Then also the e-trade now looks at issues that deal with e-payments and the delivery of goods. So if maybe just to also speak on blockchain a little bit, because that's so you would realize that from the strategic plan, the digital trade area is mainly going to be underpinned by blockchain technology. You have the e certificate of origin that has already been launched. You have countries like Rwanda already issuing out e-certificates of origins that are underpinned by blockchain technology. So what generally happens with blockchain is that whatever transaction that happens between parties in different jurisdictions, it happens in real time, and information is generally accessible to everyone. So we have got e-certificates of origins, we've got bills of lading, we've got smart contracts that make sure that transactions are executable in real time. The main advantage of having to use blockchain technology, particularly with this model that we have in COMESA, is that first of all, it does away with intermediaries, the banks that sort of make the trade financing process a bit difficult. It also helps with trade facilitation. It also helps, to combat commercial fraud that happens. We talk about tax misinvoicing, your illicit transfers. So one thing that actually is a hindrance currently, if we're really looking at how COMESA has done in trying to implement this DFTA, has to do with the concept of harmonization. So you realize that one, there is a great digital divide within the COMESA member states themselves, and secondly, most countries still don't have regulatory frameworks that support digital trade, and trying to harmonize that has been a challenge. There is also the harmonization of pricing of goods itself. It's an issue that currently they're still talking about. But by and large, I think that it's actually a good framework in the sense that it is mainly centered on the 99% that sort of is always marginalized when we try to look at international trade. Then I'm talking about cross-border traders, small to medium enterprises, which are basically the backbone of most trading activities within the COMESA region. So you realize that they also have what they call the mobile app, which is user-friendly to cross-border traders, where they can access market information, which is very important in this digital economy. They can also make e-payments, and it is linked to the COMESA Center. So you realize that the framework itself therefore mirrors the Malaysian framework in the sense that it is mainly focused on ensuring that it empowers the SMEs and, in our case, also the cross-border traders.
Okay, that's such good contribution, Chido Chashe, about that. And I think it's what Magdalene had started speaking about, especially on the harmonization and with the economies, like when you look like at Ethiopia, Djibouti, and the forex differences. And there's a lot that the countries need to work through for the digital free trade area to work under the blockchain. And I would assume each country needs to have a certain level of digital development. Like, you cannot be struggling with the basic digital needs and successfully participate in the digital free trade area. I think there's quite a bit of assumptions, or maybe we'll get back to that to hear, like, are the countries supporting each other, or if, let's say, for instance, Djibouti is struggling with its internet and connectivity issues at the very basic of the things, is Kenya trying to help in such a case? We'll get to that. But Akinyi, if I could come back to you, and possibly you speak a bit about how the COMESA digital free trade area is working in terms of, like, have the trade volumes increased? Is there any positive outcome that's being realized from the digital free trade area, or is there any noticeable difference? Okay, Akinyi, I'm not sure if you can hear me, or I don't think you can. So Magdalene, if you can come back to you, then you just continue the discussion and, like, mention about, like, the trade volumes, and if there's been a noticeable increase or something noticeable from the digital free trade area since it was implemented.
So if you look at looking at the objectives as well as what was intended, in terms of easing business across the different regions, across the different countries, we were looking at increasing of it, the digital free trade area. The digital free trade area had the potential to create $17.2 billion worth of market for member states. Yeah. So if that is the potential that the digital free trade area has for COMESA members, we need then to look at the baseline that we had. So according to statistics from the COMESA Trade Statistics Report, I only managed to get the one from 2018. My apologies to our participants. I didn't manage to get the latest figures from at least what was reported from last year, is that we were looking at total trade volumes of $240 million. This was an increase of $2 billion, seeing as the previous year had been at about 238 billion, if I'm not wrong. So the increase was as a result of increased exports and trade from DRC, Sudan, Zambia, Libya, and Rwanda. However, just interestingly, just something that I could quickly point out is that we had a decrease in global imports. Yeah. And this was by about 7%, and this accounts for about $165 billion, coming down to, from $165 billion to $154 billion. And this was as a result of reduced global imports by countries such as Egypt, Libya, Ethiopia, and Djibouti. And just those countries alone accounted for about 20 billion in terms of the reduced trade from a global perspective. So what you find is, and I'd like, perhaps obviously this may not be completely accurate, but then we would like to imagine that this as a result of increased trade among the countries.
Yeah.
So inter-African countries, trading more, as opposed to trading more with the other global markets. Which I guess to some extent then, and this is not, I'm not saying that this is purely a result of the digital free trade area, but I'm just saying that this is actually a good sign that more and more countries are coming on board and are willing to trade with one another. And the reason why this is important to note is that even as we have the conversations around the digital free trade area, is that you cannot help but also have at the back of our minds, or also, in terms of also perhaps looking at it as an enabler. Perhaps, whereas I know, yes, of course, it is being rolled out for COMESA members, but I cannot help but look at it as a potential enabler to even fast track some of the key objectives that had been set us for the overall Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. So my hope would be that the conversation would not be just posted at COMESA. Yes, that can be where we pilot it, but I'd be looking at how can we expand it to the entire continent as a facilitator for trade. Because as Akinyi spoke about earlier, I think she's the one who mentioned about the pillars, looking at issues of e-trade, looking at issues related to e-logistics, and how that can increase facilitation or enhance facilitation for trade between countries, and looking at improving the regulations as well as legislative environments to boost trade, just not within the countries, but also externally, that being looked at in terms of the statistics, in terms of the numbers or the percentage of MSMEs vis-a-vis those that are, large enterprises and their contribution to the individual economies of these countries. So for me, that is where I would, in terms of taking the conversation forward, that is where I would see us moving towards, or that would be my hope.
Yeah, okay. That's very interesting, especially because with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, you think that Africa now is more focused on the whole Africa, other than just COMESA and SADC and EAC. So you think that there's a bigger Africa
other than regional, exactly.
Yeah. So and then I would think, but then I think a positive thing with the COMESA Free Trade Area, because it has happened within Africa. I would hope that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area will borrow some of the things that COMESA has been trying to. But
exactly.
And, go on.
No. I was just going to say it's that, when we talk about enhancing trade within countries and facilitating it, it's also because I'm looking at it in terms of scaling, as I mentioned about scaling the conversation, is that if you look at what the DFTA could do just for the region, we are looking at saving up to $400 million annually in clearance documentation if we were to adopt blockchain fully. So if that is just for COMESA, now try and project that for the entire continent. But as I said, this would be an ideal conversation if it's that our economies were at par.
Yeah.
So even for instance, when you look at now, what I believe again it was Akinyi earlier on when we were starting the conversation and saying, like for instance, the EAC, the East African Community, had sought to set up something such as this. So the discussion would be, okay, why has it not been successfully rolled out? Could it perhaps have something to do with the fact that when you look at the members of the EAC and you try and compare the economies, whereas yes, we do have in terms of comparisons, we are not too far off from each other, but in certain aspects we are. So we need to look at, for instance, things like critical infrastructure. So when you talk of, for instance, blockchain, obviously you cannot help but to think about connectivity. So what is the connectivity levels, for instance, in a country such as Kenya vis-a-vis a country such as Uganda? So this is just an example I'm giving for, when we try to adopt it for the EAC. Now, extrapolate that now for COMESA. And we include countries such as Djibouti. We include countries such as Sudan. We include countries such as Egypt, which have been ridden by conflict of late, even Ethiopia just recently. So it's really, we need to contextualize the conversation, whereas yes, it is the ideal, and yes, I am hopeful. I don't want to focus on so much the negatives, but at the end of the day, I feel like the conversation needs to be contextualized really, and just have a more in-depth analysis on where, and almost an in-depth analysis, looking at where are these countries and what then needs to be done in order to uplift these countries and at least bring us to par when it comes to the bare minimums that would allow for the adoption of some of the proposals.
Yeah.
Such as now having a common regulation around what is it called? Around, like, for instance, blockchain, or even, for instance, the issues related to the electronic certificates of trade. Yeah. So in order for them to be adopted across the board, you would need to have all the revenue authorities having the same level of technologies in order to read them.
Yeah.
So what good does it do to have it read in Rwanda, but then when we have the goods being imported in Kenya, the person has to have a completely different set of documentation. Then that brings the issue of duplicity when it comes to regulation.
I think this.
Yeah.
I think I completely agree.
Sorry.
It's okay. I completely agree with what you're saying. I'm actually nodding my head furiously with every point you're making. So Chido Chashe, if you could, is the COMESA digital free trade area an ambitious move? I mean, we are supposed to speak about the pros and cons and to hear about it. It's definitely a good idea, but is it super ambitious? Is it, with especially what Magdalene is saying, different economies, connectivity, different issues that the countries have, then we have a digital free trade area. Is it an ambitious scheme?
Well, I think my answer is going to be a bit biased and maybe move away from what Magdalene was saying, mainly because I am pro-technology. So the one thing that we need to be mindful of is the fact that whether we like it or not, Revolution 4.4 is upon us, right? We can't run away from blockchain technology. We can't run away from the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and everything. And those are some of the issues that make up this conversation that we are having today. So whether it's more ambitious for COMESA to do it right now or not, I think it's beyond the conversation, mainly because it's something that is upon us, and either way, we are going to do it. So it becomes a question of whether we should do it now or wait for when it's too late to then start implementing it. You look at the COMESA model, it's progressive in the sense that COMESA is not, it's a market that incorporates different different regional economic communities. You talk of your EAC, you talk of your SADC. And most of these, they've got countries that are individually already having blueprint document on e-commerce and everything, which is something that is progressive. I think what actually has to be done, maybe going back to the point that was being made about connectivity issues and all that, is to try and mobilize funds, not as COMESA, but the whole region, mainly because the smaller countries that we are talking of that won't be able to catch on to the technological wagon still need to be helped in a way, right? They can't be left behind, but at the same time, there can be reasons as to why the digital free trade area cannot be successful or launched. If you try to look at the framework of the African Continental Free Trade Area, I was actually reading something that was talking about how they have decided to initiate third phase negotiations that are going to be focused on e-commerce. And the strategic plan basically is going to be focused on what the regional economic communities have done so far in terms of digitalizing trade, in terms of e-commerce. And the COMESA framework seems to be the one that is on the forefront. So basically, when we get to phase 3 negotiations of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we're going to realize how the whole of Africa is going to be digitalized, right? So in a way, we can then say it's an ambitious thing because that's where the world is going, and eventually we have to move on to that. You realize how COMESA is also trying to be part of the tripartite free trade area, which is an amalgamation of COMESA, EAC, and SADC member states to try and deal with this whole concept of overlapping membership. And you realize that the moment they get onto COMESA, they are already going to be forced to be part of the digital free trade area, meaning to say in less than, in a few years to come, we would have successfully digitalized the whole continent. The problem with us putting a stop to this plan, thinking that it's overambitious, comes from the fact that we do not only trade inwardly. We also trade with the EU. We trade with Asian countries. We trade with American economies that have already set up plans for digital trade, that have already gone a step ahead as far as e-commerce is concerned. So in a way, I would say we are moving in the right direction, but we just then have to address the issues like that have been raised about how smaller economies that are not financially able to jump onto the wagon, how they can be helped so that they then is a seamless launch of the free trade area. And in any case, maybe to point to something that was actually happening now, you realize that with COVID-19, it was becoming very difficult for physical movement of persons and everything. And COMESA actually launched a platform which was meant to share information with regards to essential products and goods. You realize that that's a very progressive step, if you ask me, which then supports this concept that it's actually timeless that we are having a digital free trade area talk right now. Because after COVID, post-COVID economic recovery is going to be difficult, it's going to be brutal, and there are a lot of technological changes that happened while everybody else was so focused on COVID. So it's actually a good thing that they managed to successfully launch that platform where manufacturers, consumers, and buyers can then get information with regards to where essential products are and how they are being priced and everything. And from my knowledge, I don't think there has been complaints with the platform not being user-friendly or anything. It has actually been working well. So if you ask me, I'll still maintain that it is not really an overly ambitious project. But I would then just say most of these other countries that are non-COMESA members, they actually have to also join onto the wagon and make sure that they also then digitalize, because when it becomes when we then have this after framework that's going to touch the whole of Africa from Cape to Cali, it's going to be difficult for those members that were not initially privy to this whole conversation to then try to join in maybe at a later stage. Maybe also to say with the use of ICT, if you look, maybe let me start by talking about single windows. You realize how there was a few years back a talk about on single windows, how they would facilitate trade and everything. And you would realize that organizations like the World Customs Organization were also jumping onto the ship, making sure that countries that are the least developed countries are helped in ensuring that they launch that. You talk of the one that exists between the border of Zambia and Zimbabwe, right? When we start talking about technology, it's not about whether Zimbabwe is able to do that, but it's about what can be done collectively, right? So you've got already Microsoft talking about how it has got a plan to launch 2 mega data platforms in South Africa that are going to be servicing the whole of Africa. So already that deals with this whole issue of whether it's going to be possible to connect to the blockchain or to connect to the online platforms, because we already have other key players coming in and investing in this because it's a good initiative. So what I think is to try and deal with this with this whole disparity when it comes to deal with this digital divide in most countries. I'll go back to what I really believe. Most countries have to be deliberate when it comes to their internal policies. They should open up themselves to ensure that there is investment that is coming in. Most of these tech companies are willing to invest in Africa because at the end of the day, that's where the world is going, and this is more or less like virgin territory. So they need to open themselves up, have policies and regulations that are friendly to digital economy, to digital trade, to e-commerce, to investment, so that we have these companies like Microsoft. We then have this organization coming in and investing in this so that it becomes a success. So in my belief, I would summarize by saying we are in the right direction. We just have to be deliberate when it comes to our policies as COMESA and also as a continent.
Okay, thank you very much. And those are very good. That's such a good input you've given. And I especially like the thought that for countries that are not using the digital free trade kind of arrangement within Africa, they need to catch up if like the entire Africa continental free trade area is going to inevitably, what you're saying, the digitalization is needed because of the fourth industrial revolution. Like it's already here. So maybe, yeah, you've sold your point to me. I agree. It's not overambitious. It's what's needed.
May I just add something?
Yes.
May I just add something to what Chido said? To the question as to whether the COMESA DFTA is an ambitious plan. I believe that it's an ambitious plan, yes, but it's an achievable ambition, because it's been done before. Just like I started by saying that it's been done before. For example, if you look at countries like the Association of Southeast Asian Countries, the nations, where they cooperate on issues to do with digital trade facilitation, infrastructure gaps, cross-border payments, solutions and online security, and all that, coordinating committees on e-commerce, and all these are things that if a country like the Association of Southeast Asian Countries have done it, and the EAC, just like I said before, the EAC is introducing it. ECOWAS is also in the process of doing it. SADC, the most underperformed regional economic community in Africa, is actually approved its strategy in 2012. So it's something that actually countries are thinking that it's a necessity. However, the challenges to the implementation for this to be a reality, it's there's so many challenges that need to first be overcome, because we're looking at, for example, in COMESA, we're looking at countries that have, among the 21 countries that form the COMESA bloc, you have countries like, for example, Seychelles, that has close to 100% of its population having access to internet. But then you have a country like Eritrea that has almost 1% having access to 1% of its population having access to internet. And you look and you see that internet usage disparity among the countries, and saying that all these countries can actually implement the provisions of the COMESA DFTA at the time is close to impossible. But then, just like I said before, that it is something that is possible given time. And also, the other challenge that might be that the DFTA might pose that needs to be overcome is the issue to do with the currency exchange fluctuations. How are they going to deal with those challenges? How are they going to deal with the challenges like corruption, especially at the border control, at the border posts? How are they going to deal with such challenges? How are they going to deal with the issue of lack of trust that comes with e-commerce or rather e-trade? How are they going to deal with such challenges of lack of trust, especially from the consumers' end? And with regards to the mode of payment that is now cashless, with regards to quality of goods, with regards to delivery, how are consumers going to be catered for? How are they going to be ensured? How are the interest going to be catered for? So all this, once we have a clear plan on how all these challenges are going to be rectified, then there is a possibility that COMESA will actually fully implement and enforce the provisions of the DFTA that it has in place. So yes, it is an ambitious plan. It's in fact overly ambitious, so to speak, but then it's an achieved ambition.
Okay, I like what you say, especially on the disparities. The disparities are there. Maybe what I understand from this is that it's an ambitious scheme, but it can be achieved. But the problems are real problems that they have to deal with, like the problems like what you say, like Seychelles, the access to the internet, Eritrea on the other hand. I mean, the challenges are real, but it's achievable. And what Chido Chashe said is that even if we were to run away from it, it is something that we have to do at some point. The earlier we do it, the better. We will aim to finish in the next 15, 18 minutes. If at this point, I think there's a couple of questions that have been put on the chat. If I could ask Magdalene for you to answer the first question. And the question was the point on law harmonization. How is Malaysia achieving that? Which I think that Malaysia, it's just, you can answer it, but I don't think they would have the same kind of issue that COMESA would have, yeah?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So with regards to harmonization of laws, it's not the same. It's not. But maybe just to add on to that is that, just to add on, if you don't mind, just give me 2 minutes, is that when you look at the issues of conflict of laws, it doesn't apply to the DFTA. It applies to issues related, for instance, even if you look at EAC, or even just let's concentrate on COMESA and some of the challenges that it has had previously. Because of issues related to perhaps even tariff, issues related to tariff concerns in terms of differentiation, we had Tanzania drop out. So if we cannot even agree, not saying that not to mean that the COMESA members have tariff issues currently, but if it's that there are ongoing challenges with regards to tariff concerns, then how are we going to address the issues related to conflict of laws relating to the implementation of the DFTA? And that again takes me back to what I had talked about when it comes to blockchain technology. And the reason why I keep bringing that up is because blockchain technologies to be adopted, which is an anchor of the DFTA, regulatory environment needs to be created. And when you speak of regulatory environment, you're talking about policies and laws. So when we talk about, let's say, we're looking at issues related to laws that perhaps, or policies that are perhaps not even started being written in some of these countries. So it takes me back again to the conversation that I had brought up about the comparison in terms of economic differentiation in terms of where we are. Again, just to compare some of the countries that we have, comparing Swaziland to Congo, or Comoros to Seychelles in comparison to Eritrea and Egypt. and also looking at where they are even socio-politically, because these conversations, we need to remember, are not happening in a vacuum. They're happening in a political environment. So if you look at, for instance, the countries that are even about to go into elections in the next 2 years, just within the region that are members of COMESA, and what is currently already happening, for instance, in a country such as Ethiopia and the ongoing conflicts. So it's to look at that, then also looking at the issues related to the timelines that have been set for this such adoption. And for again such adoption to happen again, as I mentioned, is that a safe and enabling regulatory environment needs to be created. So really everything is actually connected. It's all dots that are connected, leading up to a larger conversation. Yeah. Just to mention that the two are not the case of Malaysia doesn't really apply to the COMESA instance. It's just that it was fashioned out of the free trade zone in terms of some of the principles that were taken, and then that is what we used for the COMESA DFTA. Yeah.
Okay. And I think the second question also, I think it's the same. I think it's the same feeling everyone who's listening to this conversation has, because you think African countries, either they are alike but so different as well. It's like even the socioeconomic landscape in each African country, you may think it's within Africa, but it's so different. I mean, like what's going on sociopolitically in Nigeria is so different conversation to South Africa, for instance. What's happening in Egypt is so different from what's happening in Kenya, for instance. And so there's so much within these countries themselves that hinders a lot of common conversations. There's common things, but also some very different things. And so the next question to the Chasha, if you had even mentioned about it, like the single window, the single window clearing system for imports coming into these countries. So the question is, especially on the custom systems that are not interfaced. So and also comment on the data exchange for tax administration purposes within COMESA. How has that been addressed, if at all?
Maybe by way of response, I'll start by saying these are some of the issues that COMESA member states still have to really think about and talk. And if I have to take this conversation back to the use of blockchain technology, particularly within customs operations, you realize that it makes it very easy for customs to share information, because, like I said before, when there is a trade transaction that's happening at any particular moment, it is done in real time, and all the parties that have got access to that blockchain can easily access the information. So the issue of customs sharing information, you would find it in the trade facilitation agreement, right? To which COMESA member states are a party to, which provides for mechanisms and ways in which customs administrations have to share information, and all the relevant stakeholders that need to access information that need to access data and any information that happens within any transaction. So if we then look at the dictates of the trade facilitation agreement, those are the same that would apply in COMESA by virtue of COMESA countries being parties to the same agreement, being member states to the same agreement. And then now taking that back to blockchain technology, I would think that how the provisions are set up in the TFTA, it's so vague to an extent that we then need the blockchain technology to ensure that it facilitates the sharing of information. But however, it is my belief that we cannot just rely on the TFTA for the sharing of information and then put in place technologies that make it so easy and the information easily accessible. Rather, we also then need to have a policy document that then deals with issues of data sovereignty, because it's a conversation that's currently topping currently. If you look at how the traditional model of sharing of information is framed or structured, you realize that country A, let's say Zimbabwe, wants to ask for information or trade information for tax purposes or for customs facility, for customs administration and everything from Zambia, right? Or no, they've got a single window. So I would say maybe from Kenya. They need to apply first and wait for a period of 90 days, and then the country that has to which the request has been made, they can decide not to give the information. They have got the liberty to withhold certain information based on this principle of data sovereignty. So then, with these technologies, it becomes very difficult to withhold certain information, mainly because, like I said before, everything happens in real time, and everyone who has got access to the technology, to the platform, can then access the information. So now what then needs to be done is we need to come up with a policy document that speaks to certain issues, like data sovereignty and how it is more or less difficult to achieve when we start using these technologies. Maybe to then also go back to the issue of regulation, particularly when you look at blockchain technology. We can't regulate blockchain technology. It's difficult. It's a conversation that has to be done. Can we regulate the platform itself, or we rather would regulate the functions of the platform? So what do I mean is, when we say that the certificate of origin is underpinned by blockchain technology, we can't then regulate blockchain technology as is, but we then regulate how the certificate of origin is when it's on blockchain technology. Now, taking this conversation back to data sharing and information, we can't then regulate the platform, which is blockchain technology. Rather, we then have to come up with policies to ensure that we regulate how data can then be transferred. But as far as today is concerned, I don't think we have that document that really speaks to how that can be achieved, particularly looking at how they want to make sure that the whole process is underpinned by a technology that is so different from single windows that we already had been regulated.
Thanks for that. I think that answers it. Akinye, if you could also speak about the next question on cybersecurity and fintech and taxing of the digital economy. I will have you answer about cybersecurity and fintech, and mention what you can about taxing of the digital economy. I'll say why on the taxing of the digital economy. We've had such extensive discussions on that in this forum, but just speak about the question.
Thank you. So the question on data protection and cyber security within the digital free trade area. Thank you, Steve Adia, for asking that question. For now, I wouldn't really say that COMESA has a comprehensive provisions on data protection and cybersecurity within the COMESA itself, because as for now, I'm not really I'm not well researched, or rather well read on that particular area. But I know that the AU, the African Union, has a Malabo Convention on cybersecurity and data protection, and also the AU draft on digital transformation strategy for Africa, the Vision 2020 and 2030. So generally, all this try to protect data and prevent cybersecurity and other cyber warfare. And on the issue of fintech and taxing of the digital economy, I would say that regionally, there's really no, I'm not aware if there's a regional tax administration, because I also saw a similar question on the same, on data exchange for tax administration purposes being incorporated. So I haven't really, regionally, I'm not aware of any, but I know that at national level, there are several mechanisms that ensure that taxing of the digital economy is actually a thing that occurs. Because, for example, if you look at Benin, there's a 5 franc per megabyte of amount that is taxed on social media usage. And also in Kenya, for example, there's also the 15% excess duty on telephone and internet data conversation. And also in Nigeria, I know Nigeria that is planning to introduce a 5% VAT on all e-commerce sales, and Tanzania and Uganda that also introduced tax on use of social media usage in 2018. So, and then generally two issues that arise from taxing of digital economies. One is custom duties on electronic transmissions, and I will join that with the question that came up on this is on taxing of digital economy. Are you aware of any discussions or fora for the harmonization of policy on this issue within COMESA EAC or any other regional economic bloc? So I know that for the two issues that I'm going to talk about, that is the customs duties on electronic transmissions. That is an issue that is it's a discussion that is currently ongoing at the World Trade Organization. So we really do not have a comprehensive ideologies on that. And also the next issue is the issue on corporate tax on companies, especially the multinational multinational companies. That is also an issue that is being discussed at the OECD Inclusive Framework on Base Erosion and Profit Shifts. So really, generally, on tackling of digital economies, so there are two issues that arise on the same, and on fintech, that is quite a tricky one, because generally fintech is a usage of technology in financial services, and the benefit that comes along with that is that you're able to there's the ability of consumers, or rather traders, buyers, or suppliers or producers being in a position to provide or to better access financial services. And for example, if you look at things to do with cross-border payment mechanisms, where payment of cross-border trade is able to occur in real time. And if you look at things to do with, especially at the African continental free trade area, being in a position to expand fintech through opening of markets to financial services imports. You look at the issue of supporting digital infrastructure, especially through the Malabo Convention, and all these are things that have been incorporated. And I would say that comprehensively, given that the African continental free trade area also tries to govern the COMESA region generally, these are things that would fall also under both under COMESA and under African Union. So that's just a general summary of Adia's question.
Okay. Thanks, Akini, for that. And the comment I would like to make on the tax of the digital economy in Africa. We've had a discussion on that quite extensively on Africa, Aisha, and it's basically a lot of what you said, Akini. Quite a lot of that on different African countries. What they're doing is that they have taken unilateral measures to deal with to tax the digital economy, which is not working very well because for instance, if Kenya decides, or Uganda has a social media tax, so that every person who wants to access internet, they have to pay a certain amount of money every month to get access to internet. So you realize what Africa is doing to itself is that it's pitching itself against another African country. So that, for instance, if Kenya decides to, like the digital service tax that Kenya has introduced in the Finance Act 2019. So if Kenya decides to apply a tax, what would happen is that Google might say, you know what, we don't have such a huge market in Kenya. Let's move to Nigeria or some other place. So we've had this discussion because, especially on the taxation of the digital economy, Africa stands to gain greatly if it's working as the entire of Africa, because there's greater bargaining power on the market, on the digital market in the whole of Africa than in an individual African country. So that's a good question, and that's a discussion that we, every time after we have that discussion on taxing of the digital economy, we plan on having a next discussion. And in fact, we will have a discussion on the taxation of the digital economy again in the second week of October. So we only have like a minute left, and there's a couple of questions still that remain. And so what we will do is I will ask for Magdalene, if you could make your general closing remarks, but then also you can touch on any of the questions that's on the chat that hasn't been answered yet, so that you can give your input on it. And then Chido, Chashe, you can go next, give your final remarks and touch on any question, and then Akinyi.
Actually, sorry, I'm just here to say a quick goodbye. I have a call starting now, another call.
Yeah.
I'm a bit late. So mine is just to say thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this issue. In my closing remarks, really, it's just to reiterate what I talked about earlier. Yeah, so just to reiterate what I mentioned with regards to just the realization that this conversation cannot happen in a vacuum, that there are various political as well as economic considerations that need to happen across the board, at least at national level, even as we project it for the regional level, as well as looking at what are the benefits for the same. So I do not discount in general, I do not discount the overall benefits and the advantages that are proposed on having something such as a DFTA. However, it's the realization that we do have differences, varying differences, looking at where the economies lie, as well as the political conversations that are obviously informing policy. And with that, kindly, I would quickly beg for you to allow me to please jump on.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, and everyone have a good evening.
Okay. So, Chido Chashe, if you could now give your, I see when Akinyi has dropped off from the call. If you could give your final remarks and touch on any of the other questions that hasn't been answered.
Okay. So thank you so much. Maybe there is a question that I still remember that was asking about an Africa trade organization. I think it's Jacob who asked if we need to have an Africa trade organization that sort of deals with all these issues. So maybe to answer his question, I'll say we have the African Continental Free Trade Area that does the job. It is an initiative for African countries by African countries to ensure that it enhances trade within this region. We have the African Continental Free Trade Area that on its own it then deals with whether it then deals with all the issues that you think an African a trade organization that is specifically made for Africa would deal with, because in a way it's actually for Africa by Africans that they may trade within Africa and enhance their trade volumes and maybe to conclude on the digital free trade area, I'll say that yes, it's a good initiative, as we have heard from different panelists and all the questions that have been raised. But however, there are still issues that are hanging that need to be addressed. And one thing that I'm really appreciating about this is the fact that it's not a once-off thing, in the sense that it's not like we woke up one morning and everything was already been put in place. It's something that happens gradually. Like, for instance, we can now talk of e-certificates that have been implemented successfully. We can all talk about the online platform that has been created in 2020. So it's a process that COMESA countries are taking. It takes years, and issues that you have been raising are some of the issues that they're going to really look at over time. Because if we are being very honest with each other right now, in as much as we are saying it's underpinned by blockchain technology and everything, there is not a single country that has successfully used blockchain technology to facilitate trade within COMESA or within the African continent. So when we get to a point where we say we have successfully launched the digital free trade area, it's full and operational, I think we get to that point and all these issues would have been dealt with. So right now, what I think COMESA member states need to do is to ensure that they catch on to the wagon, get on to digital trade, try and deal with all these issues. The issues that have to do with data protection, taxation of digital goods, because it's a conversation that is still being held multilaterally. But I think it would be good if we try to have this conversation without taking up on any model and come up with a framework that actually works for Africa, that is contextual to African economies. And also there should be ways to ensure that those countries that we have been mentioning that are lagging behind when it comes to technology and access to ICT tools, we need to come up with a strategy to ensure that they are also empowered in a way, because they don't want to be left behind. What then ends up happening is, if we're not careful, we might end up creating superpowers within the continent, bigger economies benefiting from this initiative, and the smaller, least developed countries continuously being marginalized because of lack of access to ICT and all these other tools. And I think, like I said earlier, most of these countries still need to look inward. By looking inward, I mean, let's look at our internal policies as countries. I'm really happy because there is another pillar of this digital free trade area which speaks to e-regulation, where governments are being roped in to ensure that they come up with regulations and policies that are actually favoring the implementation of a digital free trade area. So most countries actually have to look inward, look in their policies, and try to catch on. I'll tell you for a fact that we've got countries like Kenya that are and Rwanda that are progressing when it comes to having legislation that favors e-commerce. But we'll go back and look at the flip side of the same coin. We've got countries like Zimbabwe that are still lagging behind, and they need to catch on. So they need to look inward, start dealing with their internal policies, internal laws and regulations, and also open up themselves to investment, so that these other technology companies can come in and make sure that they are also up to date when it comes to ICT tools, access to technology, and everything. But overall, I think it's a good initiative, and I really look forward to a fully digitalized African continent.
Okay. Thank you very much for for your comments on that. Looks like we are pretty much done for today. There's a last question that was asked, but it's on the harmonization of tax regimes within Africa. That we will have to discuss in a different discussion. I will mention quickly that from this discussion, I think it would have been interesting to hear the comments on like whether having a cryptocurrency within Africa, and within Africa, like a currency that's not backed, that's crypto. If it can help in this digital free trade within Africa, I think it might. We've had a discussion about that, quite interesting. Maybe you guys should see it on our YouTube channel and listen to that discussion about what the cryptocurrency that's being developed for Africa by through Senegal. Yeah. And then the next thing to say is that we will have a follow-up discussion on this COMESA free digital trade area. And the discussion will be especially to look at what are the opportunities that could come out of this. Like with listening to this conversation, what opportunities can I look out for from the COMESA digital free trade area? And then also what are the potential challenges and what are things to think about. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is that we will also be having our next discussion on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area in the next 2 weeks, and we will again touch base on this whole thing about Africa and trade within Africa. But I want to thank everyone who has joined the call today. And we will try and keep having the ongoing discussion, especially on the questions that haven't been addressed on our community page. Please check out our community page on the Africa iShare website. In case someone has a suggestion for a discussion topic, you can suggest it. Yeah, drop it off on the Africa iShare website. There's a place where you can suggest a topic. And and if anyone would be happy also to be a panelist for any of the future discussions, you can still drop off such a comment on the website. Chido Chashe, thank you so much for being a panelist. Akinyi and Magdalene in absentia, I'll say thanks to them as well. And I will now wrap up and say, thank you very much for everyone who joined the call. We will keep in touch and let you know of the next discussion. Yes. And I will say good night, have a nice evening, and thank you. Thank you for watching the discussion. If you like the discussions, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our videos, and follow us on social media on Facebook, Africa Aisha platform, on Twitter, Africa Aisha. Thank you.